The morning mist clung to the rolling hills of Tuscany like a lover's whisper, soft and ephemeral. Ambassador Theron Valvis of the Celestial Conclave stood at the edge of the ancient olive grove, his silver robes shimmering with embedded starlight, technology that marked him as one of the galaxy's most distinguished diplomats. For 3 millennia, he had negotiated treaties between civilizations, witnessed the rise and fall of empires, and seen wonders that would drive lesser minds to madness. Yet nothing had prepared him for this moment. His ship, a magnificent vessel, crafted from crystallized time itself, rested silently in the meadow behind him. Its presence should have summoned government officials, military commanders, perhaps even heads of state. Instead, the only being who had come to greet him was a simple human farmer named Dante Rossetti, who continued pruning his vines as if alien ambassadors landed in his fields every Tuesday. "You are certain you speak for your species?" Theron asked, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that had swayed the minds of emperors. Across 1,000 worlds, Dante paused in his work, wiping his weathered hands on a cloth that had seen better decades. His eyes, the color of rich earth after rain, held a quiet depth that made the ancient ambassador feel strangely young. "I speak for myself, friend, but perhaps that's enough." Theron's hearts began beating in an irregular pattern, a physical responses people experienced only in the presence of the truly incomprehensible. He had come to Earth with an offer that had never been refused in galactic history. The Celestial Conclave, an alliance of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the known universe, was extending membership to humanity. The benefits were beyond imagination: technology that could reshape matter at the molecular level, knowledge that spanned millions of years, access to trade routes connecting billions of worlds, and protection under the most formidable military force the galaxy had ever seen. Entire species had fought wars lasting centuries just for the chance to receive such an invitation. "Do you understand what you're declining?" Theron pressed, his diplomatic training warring with genuine bewilderment. "We offer your people ascension beyond your wildest dreams, immortality, unlimited energy, the ability to travel between stars, as easily as you walk between these trees." Dante smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face into something luminous. "I have good wine, a woman I love who laughs at my terrible jokes, and soil that grows the sweetest olives in 3 provinces. What more could a man want?" The simplicity of the response sent shockwaves through Theron's centuries of diplomatic experience. He had prepared for negotiations, for complex political maneuvering, for the intricate dance of interstellar statecraft. He had not prepared for contentment. "But your species faces challenges," Theron continued, his voice taking on the persuasive cadences that had convinced warring factions to embrace peace. Disease, aging, limited resources, the constant threat of extinction from cosmic events. "We can solve all of these problems." Dante resumed his pruning, each cut precise and deliberate. "Problems, maybe, or maybe just life. Take away the struggle, the uncertainty, the brief time we have, and what's left? Just existence without meaning." A cool breeze stirred the olive leaves, carrying the scent of growing things and the distant promise of rain. Theron found himself noticing details he had ignored for millennia. The way sunlight filtered through clouds, the sound of insects humming in the grass, the simple rhythm of honest work. "Your government surely cannot speak for all humans," Theron said, though his certainty was beginning to crack like ice under spring sun. "There must be those among you who hunger for knowledge, for power, for the glory of the stars." "Oh, there are," Dante agreed, straightening to look directly at the alien ambassador. "Plenty of them. But here's the thing about humans you might not understand. We're not much for being told what's good for us, even by ourselves." The farmer's words carried a weight that Theron couldn't quite grasp, like trying to hold water in cupped hands. In all his experience with countless civilizations, he had never encountered a species that could say no to ultimate power, without even seeming to consider it. "The conclave will not wait forever," Theron said, though the threat felt hollow even as he spoke it. "Other opportunities may not arise." Dante nodded thoughtfully, as if considering the price of grain rather than the fate of his entire species. "That's fair, but we'll take our chances, always have." As if summoned by some unspoken signal, a woman emerged from the stone farmhouse, her hair catching the afternoon light like spun gold. She carried a tray with simple clay cups and a bottle of wine that looked older than some civilizations. Her smile was warm, welcoming, utterly unimpressed by the alien dignitary standing in her garden. "This is my wife, Beatrice," Dante said, his voice softening with unmistakable love. "Beatrice, this is Ambassador Theron. He's offering to make us gods." Beatrice laughed, a sound like water over stones. "How nice. Are you staying for dinner?" Theron stared at them both. These simple humans who had just casually refused godhood and offered him a meal instead. For the first time in his incredibly long life, he found himself wondering if perhaps the galaxy's most ancient civilizations had been asking the wrong questions all along. The ambassador accepted their invitation, finding himself seated at a wooden table that had been worn smooth by generations of hands. The wine was extraordinary, carrying flavors that spoke of earth and time and patient care. As the sun set over the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Theron listened to Dante and Beatrice share stories of their life together. They spoke of small joys and quiet sorrows, of seasons that came and went, of children who had grown and grandchildren who visited on Sundays. Their love was evident in every glance, every gentle touch, every shared memory. It was a love built not on grand gestures or cosmic significance, but on the simple choice to see each day as a gift worth cherishing. When the stars emerged overhead, Theron realized that Earth's quiet refusal would indeed ripple through the galaxy, not as defiance or arrogance, but as something far more powerful, a reminder that perhaps the greatest strength lay not in reaching for the infinite, but in treasuring what was already within reach. The University of Cambridge had stood for nearly 1,000 years, its ancient stones weathered by countless seasons, and witness to the pursuit of knowledge across generations. In a small corner office overlooking the River Cam, Professor's era, Nightingale sat surrounded by towers of books that seemed to defy gravity, their subjects ranging from ancient philosophy to quantum mechanics to the poetry of distant worlds. At 32, Zara had already earned recognition as one of Earth's most brilliant philosophical minds. But tonight she found herself distracted from her latest manuscript. Across from her desk, perched rather awkwardly on a chair designed for human anatomy, sat Cale Starweaver, a cultural exchange student from the luminous reaches of Andromeda. His people, the ethereals, were beings of living light who could take physical form when needed. In his current manifestation, he appeared almost human, save for the subtle way starlight seemed to dance beneath his translucent skin, and the fact that his eyes held the depth of nebulae. He had come to Earth 6 months ago to study human philosophy, but had stayed for reasons that had little to do with academic pursuit. "Your species continues to confound my understanding," Cale said, his voice carrying harmonics that made words seem like music. The conclave's offer was discussed throughout the galaxy. Most civilizations would have celebrated for centuries just to be considered. Zara smiled, setting down her fountain pen and leaning back in her chair, the evening light streaming through. The leaded windows caught the auburn highlights in her dark hair, and Cale found himself momentarily distracted by the simple beauty of the moment. "Perhaps that's precisely why we said no," she replied, her words carrying the gentle cadence of someone who had spent her life contemplating the deeper currents of existence. "When everyone expects you to want something, the wisest choice might be to question whether you actually need it." Cale's form shimmered slightly, a sign of emotional turbulence among his people. But the knowledge they offered, the technology, the protection, how can any species choose limitation over transcendence? Is it limitation, though? Zara stood and moved to the window, watching punts drift lazily down the river as students called to each other across the water. Or is it perhaps the recognition that transcendence cannot be given, it must be earned through the journey itself? She turned back to face him, and in that moment, Cale understood why he had fallen in love with more than just her mind. There was something luminous about Zara that had nothing to do with the cosmic energies he could manipulate, something that came from within and made her more radiant than any star he had ever seen. "Tell me a story," he said, settling more comfortably into his chair. It had become their evening ritual. These exchanges of wisdom and wonder that somehow bridged the gap between species and souls. Zara's eyes sparkled with mischief. There once was a master gardener who spent 50 years cultivating the most beautiful garden in all the land. Each flower was perfectly placed, every tree pruned to mathematical precision. One day, a powerful wizard offered to wave his hand and make the garden eternally perfect. No weeds would ever grow, no storms would ever damage it, no seasons would ever change it. She paused, watching as understanding began to dawn in Kel's starlight eyes. The gardener thanked the wizard politely and declined. When asked why, he simply said, "Because then it would no longer be my garden, it would be yours." Kale was quiet for a long moment, processing not just the words, but the layers of meaning beneath them. In his culture, advancement meant joining the collective consciousness of the ethereals, sharing knowledge and power until individual identity became part of something greater. The concept of choosing to remain separate, to preserve one's unique perspective even at the cost of limitation, was revolutionary. "You believe suffering has value," he said finally, not as a question, but as a revelation. "I believe growth has value," Zara corrected gently, "and growth requires resistance, challenge, the possibility of failure. Remove those elements, and you have stability, perhaps even perfection, but not life, not in any meaningful sense." She moved closer to where he sat, and Kel's ethereal form unconsciously brightened at her approach. What had started as academic fascination had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated. Love between species was not unheard of in the galaxy, but it was rare, complicated by vast differences in biology, psychology, and lifespan. "Is that why you chose to come here?" Zara asked softly. "To understand our choice to remain ourselves." Kel's light dimmed slightly, a sign of vulnerability among his people. "I came to understand your philosophy. I stayed to understand your heart." The admission hung between them like a bridge spanning two worlds. Zara reached out, her fingers brushing against his luminous cheek, marveling at the way her touch seemed to create small galaxies of light beneath his skin. "And what have you learned?" she whispered. "That perhaps the greatest wisdom is knowing when not to transcend," he replied, his form becoming more solid, more present, as if her touch was anchoring him to this moment, this choice, this beautiful limitation of loving someone who would age and change and eventually fade while he remained constant. The conclave views humanity as children playing with concepts they don't understand. Kale continued, his voice growing stronger. "But I think they're wrong. I think humanity understands something the rest of us have forgotten, which is that the universe is not a problem to be solved, but a symphony to be experienced. And symphonies require both harmony and discord, both crescendo and silence, both beginning and ending." Zara felt tears gathering in her eyes, not from sadness but from the overwhelming recognition of being truly understood. Here was a being who could live for millennia, who could manipulate the very fabric of reality, who had access to the accumulated wisdom of countless civilizations, and he was choosing her, choosing this moment, choosing the beautiful fragility of mortal love. "The galaxy will think you're mad," she said. Though her tone suggested she hoped he would prove them right, Kale smiled, and in that expression was all the light of distant suns and the warmth of home fires. "Then we'll be mad together. Perhaps that's another thing humans understand that the rest of us don't, that some things are worth being unreasonable about." As night settled over Cambridge, two beings from different worlds sat together in a small office filled with books and starlight, writing their own philosophy of love in the space between heartbeats. Outside, the universe continued its ancient dance of creation and destruction, but here, in this moment, eternity felt small enough to hold into pairs of hands reaching for each other across the infinite dark. The floating gallery drifted through the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, its crystalline walls capturing and refracting the distant light of Sol into prismatic rainbows that danced across the assembled artwork. Marcus Sterling stood before his latest creation, a sculpture that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its form shifting between solid matter and pure emotion made visible. At 28, Marcus had already gained recognition as Earth's most innovative artist, but his recent work had transcended anything he had previously imagined. The sculpture before him pulsed with an inner light that spoke of love, loss, hope, and the infinite complexity of connection between souls. It was a piece that could only have been created through collaboration with someone who understood beauty in ways no human ever could. "You've captured the resonance of the third movement perfectly," came a voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Liana Vorthik emerged from behind the sculpture, her form a study in impossible grace. She was Valen, a species that existed as living art, their bodies constantly shifting between states of matter and energy, their very existence a canvas for the universe's creative force. When she moved, reality seemed to paint itself around her in colors that had no names. Her current form resembled a tall, elegant humanoid composed of flowing mercury and starlight. But Marcus had learned that her true beauty lay not in any single shape, but in the infinite potential for transformation that defined her very being. "The way you've woven the chromatic frequencies into the molecular structure," Liana continued, her hand passing through the sculpture and somehow making it more real rather than less. "It sings the story of your world's choice, harmony through independence rather than absorption into a greater whole." Marcus smiled, watching as her touch caused new patterns to emerge within his work. Their collaboration had begun 3 months ago when she had arrived on Earth as part of a Valen cultural expedition, seeking to understand why humanity had refused the Conclave's offer through the lens of artistic expression. What neither of them had expected was the profound creative and personal connection that had blossomed between them. "I never could have conceived this without you," Marcus admitted, his fingers trailing through the air where her luminous form cast impossible shadows. "You've shown me that art isn't just something we create, it's something we become." Liana's form shimmered with pleasure, colors cascading across her surface like aurora borealis given life among her people. To share the creative process so intimately was the deepest form of love, a merging of souls through the act of bringing beauty into existence. "And you have shown me something equally profound," she replied, her voice taking on harmonics that made the sculpture resonate with sympathetic vibrations. "Your species creates not to achieve perfection, but to express the beautiful imperfection of individual perspective. Each human artist sees the universe differently, and in that difference lies infinite possibility." Marcus reached toward her, and she solidified just enough for their hands to touch. The contact sent ripples of synesthetic sensation through both of them. He could taste the color of her thoughts, while she could feel the texture of his emotions. It was a form of intimacy that transcended physical sensation, a joining of creative spirits that neither of their species had previously thought possible. "The gallery opens to the public tomorrow," Marcus said, gesturing toward the other pieces they had created together over the past months. Each sculpture, painting, and installation told a part of the story, humanity's quiet refusal to be absorbed into galactic civilization, and the unexpected beauty that emerged from choosing to remain uniquely themselves. "Representatives from 47 different species have requested invitations," Liana noted, her form brightening with anticipation, "including several from the Conclave itself. They still don't understand your people's choice, but they're beginning to recognize that perhaps understanding isn't the only valid response to beauty." Marcus walked through the gallery, marveling at what they had accomplished together. Here was a painting that captured the exact moment of Dante Rossetti's gentle refusal, rendered in pigments that shifted perspective based on the viewer's emotional state. There stood a kinetic sculpture that demonstrated the ripple effect of Earth's decision, showing how one species' choice to remain independent had begun to inspire others to question their own relationship with galactic authority. But the centerpiece remained the sculpture they had just completed, a work that seemed to embody the very essence of love, transcending boundaries not by erasing them, but by celebrating them. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked quietly, pausing before a smaller piece that showed two figures from different worlds reaching toward each other across an impossible gulf. "Choosing to love someone whose lifespan is a heartbeat compared to yours." Liana's form stilled, becoming more solid, more present. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Time is not measured in years, Beloved, it is measured in moments of perfect connection. I would rather have decades of mortal love with you than millennia of immortal solitude. She moved to stand beside him, her hand finding his with the gentle precision of long practice. Besides, who says that love must end when one form ends? Energy cannot be destroyed, only transformed. Perhaps that is another secret your species understands, that the most beautiful things are not those that last forever, but those that burn bright enough to leave echoes in eternity. As if summoned by her words, the gallery's observation deck filled with the soft murmur of arriving guests. Beings from across the galaxy had come to witness this unprecedented collaboration between human and Valen artists, drawn by reports of art that could somehow capture the intangible essence of humanity's puzzling choice. Marcus watched through the transparent walls as delegates, scholars, and art lovers from dozens of species floated toward the gallery in vessels of every conceivable design. Some came in ships that looked like living creatures, others in geometric constructions that defied Euclidean principles, and still others arrived as pure energy that required no vessel at all. They're looking for answers, Lyanna observed, her form beginning to take on the formal patterns appropriate for receiving guests. They want to understand how a single species refusal could create such resonance throughout the galaxy. And what will we tell them? Marcus asked, making his own preparations as Earth's cultural representative. Lyanna smiled, and in that expression was all the warmth of a sun and all the mystery of the spaces between stars. We'll show them that some questions are more beautiful than their answers, that love doesn't require understanding to be valid, that the universe becomes more magnificent not when all voices sing in unison, but when each voice contributes its own unique note to the cosmic symphony. As the first visitors began entering the gallery, Marcus and Lyanna stood together before their collaborative masterpiece. Two beings from impossibly different worlds who had found in each other not just love, but a new way of seeing the universe itself. Around them, their art spoke wordlessly of humanity's choice and its consequence is not conquest or submission, but the radical possibility that diversity itself might be the galaxy's greatest treasure. The ripples of Earth's quiet refusal continued to spread, carried now not just in diplomatic channels or military assessments, but in the transformative power of beauty shared between souls who dared to love across the infinite dark. The trading post at Nexus Station floated in the neutral zone between three major galactic powers, a ramshackle collection of modules and docking bays that had grown organically over the centuries. Here beings from across the galaxy came to trade not just goods and services, but stories and dreams from the far reaches of space. In a dimly lit cantina that smelled of exotic spices and recycled air, Elena Morningstar sat across from her companion, nursing a drink that glowed with bioluminescent swirls. Elena was 34, with the kind of weathered beauty that came from a lifetime spent among the stars. Her dark hair was streaked with premature silver from exposure to cosmic radiation, and her eyes held the distant look of someone who had seen too many sunsets on alien worlds. She was one of Earth's few deep space explorers, the kind of person who couldn't be content with any horizon she could see. Across from her sat Caius Driftburn. Though names meant little to his people, the nomads of the void, his species had evolved in the empty spaces between galaxies, becoming beings of pure wanderlust who existed as much in the currents of hyperspace as in normal reality. In his current form, he appeared roughly humanoid, but seemed to shift slightly when Elena wasn't looking directly at him, as if he existed in several dimensions simultaneously. 3 more systems declared independence this week, Elena said, her voice carrying the easy rhythm of someone comfortable with long silences and deeper conversations. The hegemony is calling it the human contagion, as if choosing self-determination were some kind of disease. Caius smiled, the expression rippling across features that seemed to be made of compressed starlight and shadow. Perhaps it is the most beautiful kind of disease, one that spreads hope rather than fear. They had met 6 months ago on a forgotten world at the edge of the galactic rim, both seeking something they couldn't quite name in the silence between civilizations. Elena had been documenting ancient ruins left by a species that had vanished eons ago, while Caius had been following currents in spacetime that only his people could perceive. Their first conversation had lasted 3 days, and neither had wanted it to end. "Tell me about the chorus worlds," Elena said, referring to a system they had visited together the previous month. "How are they adapting to their new independence?" Caius leaned back, his form becoming more translucent as he relaxed. "They've stopped singing the conclave's harmony for the first time in millennia. Each world is developing its own musical tradition. The cacophony is magnificent," Elena laughed, a sound that somehow made the cantina's atmosphere seem warmer. "Only you would describe galactic chaos as magnificent. Is it chaos, though?" Caius asked, his voice taking on the harmonics that meant he was thinking deeply. "Or is it perhaps the universe remembering how to breathe with many lungs instead of one?" Their relationship defied every convention. Elena knew about interspecies romance. Caius existed partially outside normal time, which meant their conversations sometimes lasted hours, while only minutes passed in the outside world. His touch could transport her consciousness across light years, showing her wonders that no human had ever witnessed. Yet for all his cosmic nature, he chose to anchor himself to her limited, mortal perspective with a devotion that made her heart ache. "The Ethereals sent another delegation to Earth last week," Elena reported, consulting a message pad that flickered with encrypted communications from across the galaxy. "They're offering to teach humanity how to achieve their form of immortality. Apparently, they believe human consciousness is uniquely suited for translation into pure energy." Caius's form darkened slightly, storm clouds gathering in the spaces between his atoms. "And how did your people respond?" "The same way they've responded to every offer," Elena said with a grin. "A farmer in Nebraska thanked them politely and offered to show them how to grow corn. The absurdity of it struck them both simultaneously, and they dissolved into laughter that attracted curious glances from other patrons. Here they were, discussing the fate of galactic civilization while sitting in a dive bar at the edge of nowhere, and somehow it felt perfectly appropriate. "You know what's truly remarkable?" Elena said when their laughter subsided. 6 months ago, the galaxy operated on the assumption that advancement meant joining larger and larger collectives. The conclave, the hegemony, the stellar union, all of them based on the idea that individual identity was something to be transcended, not preserved. She gestured toward the cantina's patrons, a diverse collection of beings from dozens of species, most of whom were engaged in animated conversations with others completely unlike themselves. "Now look around. Every species that's declared independence is finding new ways to connect, not through absorption or conquest, but through, what would you call it, resonance?" Caius suggested, his voice carrying harmonics that made the words seem to echo from dimensions Elena couldn't perceive. "They're learning to maintain their unique frequencies while still participating in the greater symphony." Elena reached across the table, her fingers finding the strange solidity of his hand. Contact with Caius was always an adventure. Sometimes her touch would sink through him like he was made of mist. Other times it was like grasping starlight given form. Tonight, he felt almost human, warm and present and undeniably real. "Is that what we're doing?" she asked softly, resonating. Caius's form brightened, and for a moment Elena could see the cosmic currents he navigated as naturally as she walked. The vast streams of energy and possibility that connected every star and world and living being in an intricate web of relationship. "We're proving that love doesn't require sameness," he said. "That connection can exist without consumption." A new group entered the cantina, their excited chatter filling the space. With unfamiliar languages and harmonics, Elena recognized the insignia. They were refugees from the Spiral Arm Collective, another civilization that had recently voted to dissolve their centralized government in favor of independent world states. "They're celebrating," Caius observed, his extra-dimensional senses picking up emotional currents that Elena could only guess at. "They've chosen uncertainty over security, and they're joyful." Elena watched the newcomers embrace other patrons, sharing their story with anyone willing to listen. The universal translator struggled with their rapid-fire speech, but the emotional content was clear. These beings had discovered something worth celebrating. In the simple act of choosing their own path, your species has done something unprecedented, Caius said, his attention returning to Elena. They've shown the galaxy that refusing power can be more powerful than accepting it. That saying no to transcendence might be its own form of enlightenment. Elena squeezed his hand, marveling at how something so impossible could feel so right. And what about us? What are we proving? Caius leaned closer, his form becoming more solid, more present, as if her proximity was anchoring him to this reality, this moment, this choice to love someone whose very existence challenged everything he had thought he knew about the nature of connection. We're proving that the universe is vast enough for every kind of love, he said. That the space between stars isn't empty, it's full of possibility, waiting for those brave enough to explore it together. As the night deepened around Nexus Station, Elena and Caius sat hand in hand, watching the galaxy celebrate its newfound diversity. The ripples of humanity's quiet refusal had reached the farthest corners of known space, not as conquest or chaos, but as an invitation to remember that the most beautiful symphonies were composed not of uniform notes, but of harmonies that celebrated the unique voice of every instrument in the cosmic orchestra. 5 years had passed since the first olive branch was quietly refused in a Tuscan vineyard, and the galaxy had transformed in ways no diplomatic protocol could have predicted. On the observation deck of the civilian transport Wanderer's Dream, Orion Blackwell stood with his beloved, watching Earth grow larger in the viewport as they approached humanity's home system. After a year-long journey through the Outer Rim territories, Orion was 31, with the lean build of someone who had spent his adult life working with his hands rather than sitting behind desks. His background was unremarkable by galactic standards, a structural engineer from Luna Colony, who had spent the last 5 years helping newly independent worlds design sustainable infrastructure. What made him extraordinary was the woman beside him, and the love that had blossomed between them against all cosmic odds. Stellara Moon Whisper belonged to the Seraphim, one of the galaxy's most ancient and enigmatic species. Her people were beings of crystalline light who had existed since the first stars ignited, immortal witnesses to the birth and death of civilizations. In her current manifestation, she appeared as a luminous humanoid figure composed of living crystal that refracted starlight into patterns of breathtaking beauty. Her eyes held the wisdom of eons, yet when she looked at Orion, they sparkled with something far more precious than knowledge. They held wonder. It looks different, Stellara observed, her voice resonating with harmonics that made words seem like music. Your home world, there's something new in its energy signature. Orion nodded, noticing what she meant even without her cosmic perceptions. Earth seemed brighter somehow, as if the planet itself was radiating a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. 5 years of being ourselves instead of trying to be what others expected us to be, he said. I think it agrees with us. Their ship was one of dozens approaching Earth, carrying beings from across the galaxy who had come not as conquerors or supplicants, but as friends. The passenger manifest read like a census of the new galactic order, independent traders from the former hegemony worlds, artist collectives from the dissolved Stellar Union, philosophers from civilizations that had chosen to break away from the ancient power structures that had governed space for millennia. Tell me again about the Festival of Choices, Stellara said, settling closer to Orion on the observation bench. Physical contact between their species required careful calibration. Too much, and her crystalline form could accidentally harmonize his molecular structure into something decidedly non-human. Too little, and they lost the profound connection that had become the foundation of their relationship. It started last year, Orion explained, his hand finding the precise position where he could touch her without risking accidental transcendence. Someone realized that the anniversary of the Conclave's first offer should be celebrated, not as a rejection of others, but as an affirmation of choice itself. Every species that's declared independence sends representatives to Earth for a week of cultural exchange. Through the viewport, they could see other ships from dozens of worlds, their designs reflecting the incredible diversity that had emerged. Once civilizations stopped trying to conform to galactic standards, some vessels looked like living creatures, others resembled geometric impossibilities, and a few existed as pure energy held together by incomprehensible technology. The Conclave is attending this year, Stellara noted, her crystalline form dimming slightly with concern. My people received the announcement. Many of the ancient powers are curious about these developments. Orion smiled, the expression carrying 5 years of accumulated confidence in humanity's unusual approach to galactic relations. Good. It's time they understood that we weren't rejecting them personally. We were just choosing to write our own story. The Wanderer's dream entered Earth's orbital space, passing through a region that had once been heavily militarized, but now bustled with civilian traffic. Trade stations and cultural centers floated alongside research facilities, where beings from dozens of worlds collaborated on projects that none of them could have imagined alone. Look, Stellara whispered, pointing toward a massive structure that hadn't existed during Orion's last visit home. It was a joint construction project between humanity and 7 other recently independent species, a space habitat designed to serve as a permanent neutral meeting ground for the new galactic order. The Garden of Worlds, Orion said, reading the name from the navigation display. They started building it 2 years ago. It's supposed to be a place where every species can maintain their own environment, while still being part of a larger community. Stellara's form brightened with delight. Symbiosis without assimilation. Your people's philosophy made manifest in architecture. As their ship docked at Luna Station, Orion and Stellara were greeted by a sight that would have been impossible 5 years earlier. The station's main concourse was filled with beings from across the galaxy. But instead of the formal diplomatic protocols that had once governed such gatherings, the atmosphere was relaxed, almost festive. Humans walked alongside crystalline seraphim. Gaseous nebula dancers swirled around chittering insectoid hive minds. And everywhere was the sound of laughter, music, and the excited chatter of beings discovering that difference could be delightful rather than threatening. Orion, a familiar voice called out across the concourse. They turned to see Marcus Sterling approaching, his arm linked with a shimmering figure who could only be Lion of Vorthok. The artist and his Valen partner had become something of a symbol. In recent years, their collaborative works serving as bridges between species that had previously seen each other as incomprehensible. Marcus, Liona, Orion said warmly, embracing his old friend while nodding respectfully to the living artwork beside him. How goes the festival preparation? Beyond our wildest dreams. Liona replied, her form cycling through colors that conveyed profound satisfaction. We have installations from 43 species, including several that have never shared their art outside their home systems before. Marcus grinned, the expression carrying the infectious enthusiasm that had made him one of Earth's most beloved cultural ambassadors. And wait until you see what the ethereals are contributing. They're creating a meditation space where visitors can experience consciousness from their perspective temporarily and safely, of course. Stellara's crystalline structure chimed with harmonious tones, the seraphim equivalent of surprised delight. They're sharing the gift of essence that is unprecedented. My people have tried for millennia to convince them to offer such experiences. Turns out all it took was asking nicely, and not demanding they join anything, Orion said with a chuckle. Who knew? As they made their way through the station toward the Earth shuttles, Orion noticed something that made his engineer's heart sing. The infrastructure around them wasn't the sterile uniformity that had characterized galactic construction for eons. Instead, it was a magnificent patchwork of different architectural philosophies, each section reflecting the aesthetic sensibilities of the species that had contributed to its design. Human practicality blended seamlessly with Valen artistic vision, seraphim harmonic principles, and nomad flow dynamics to create something entirely new. This is what we were trying to tell them, Orion murmured to Stellara as they boarded a shuttle bound for Earth's surface. You don't create beauty by making everything the same. You create it by letting everything be itself and finding harmony in the diversity. Stellara leaned against him, her crystalline form warm with stored starlight. And that is why I chose to anchor myself to mortal time, she said softly. Not because I wanted to be human, but because I wanted to love like a human completely. Temporarily, beautifully, the shuttle descended toward Earth's atmosphere, carrying them toward a planet that had become not the center of a new empire, but the heart of a new way of being. Below them, the festival of choices was about to begin, bringing together beings from across the galaxy to celebrate not conquest or submission, but the radical possibility that the universe was vast enough for every species to find its own path. Among the stars dot as they broke through the clouds and saw the ancient continents spread below, Orion reflected on the ripples that had spread from one farmer's quiet refusal to be anything other than himself. The galaxy hadn't been conquered or converted, it had been invited to remember that the most profound revolutions began not with grand declarations or mighty fleets, but with the simple courage to say, "This is who we are, and this is enough." In the distance, the lights of 1,000 different worlds twinkled in Earth's night sky, each one now free to shine with its own unique radiance in the infinite dark.